2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to this week's meeting of the Warrant Committee. I'm calling the meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. We have a number of items on the agenda. First order of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which you should all have received electronically. They have been corrected. The prior minutes have been corrected. Are there any corrections to the current agenda, the current minutes?
No corrections, just a comment. I noticed in the minutes we were referring to article numbers. The likelihood that those will be the article numbers when the warrant's written isn't that great, so it confuses people.
Oh, I see.
If people are reading the minutes afterwards. So I would try and refrain in the future from using just a little brief description of what the article is a lot better.
I would hope that they're not going to be changed because I have the index of the articles as
It's the Board of
presented.
Selectmen's prerogative to.
Until when? Because they presented to us in a 1 to 17. I mean, can it change now? I didn't think it could.
I don't know, it's up to the Board of Selectmen. Before it goes to printer, usually
Understood,
they see
but
it.
I take that, but I will also say we have an index to which we can refer that is 1 through 17 for our purposes. I don't want to belabor it, but I also know that we have something we can refer to. So,
Yes.
I would just,
And that's
I don't
always
want to
the case with that.
overcomplicate
That's all.
it. The clerk has plenty to do, keeping track of all of us. But if there are no other changes, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second, any discussion beyond? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We have very kindly invited and happily they accepted our invitation to come and talk to us about several of the warrant articles. We have the town administrator and the chair of the Board of Selectmen, which has yet to be renamed. And I welcome you to come up because we have a series of questions for you about articles that we have discussed where we need a little bit of
Your
input.
stand.
And we know that you could probably shed some light on some of these questions so that we will be able to vote on them. So we're very glad you could come. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Good evening.
You're very, very
Welcome to the
welcome.
new members.
Good evening.
God help you, the returning members.
Yeah, gluttons for
Hey,
punishment,
Michael, how are
right?
you?
All right. Yeah, slow learners. There were a couple of questions that we had that came up, and please all chime in. One of them, or actually a couple of them actually dealt with the chief financial officer's position, which is on our index, article number 15. And it may be worth getting some input from the town administrator and the chair of the selectmen about that position, because we have not yet voted on it.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me. Echo Chairman Wells's welcome to the new members and thank all the old members for coming back. A very good process last year. We started the discussion about the CFO at this table last year. There was a transition period when I was hired in the winter of 2016. There was a 5-year plan that was put forward the year prior to that. When I came in the door, we were working on 2 contingent budgets. My predecessor, Town Administrator Anne-Marie Fagan, and Town Accountant Amy Dexter had asked each of the department heads and boards and committees to try to come up with 2 working budgets. Fast forward about 16 months, the contingent budget and override successfully passed. We went through a pretty mundane process last year with respect to the budget being balanced and some constrictions on what we asked the department heads and boards and committees to expect going forward, knowing that we had just successfully worked through an override, and that was what everyone was looking for prior to. Having said that, this committee brought up some good points about financial planning for the future, and the fact that we were remiss in submitting that 5-year financial plan. Mr. Hurley, who's been on both the Board of Selectmen and currently sits on the Capital Improvement Committee, would find this, I think you would echo my sentiments, that with all of the things that are going on in our town these days, I think we're doing a very good job of fiscal year to fiscal year and quarter to quarter. I had mentioned to my board that the town accountant and her group works in FY18 and FY19 until FY18's in the rearview mirror, and then she's focused on 19 and 20, which is where we are now. The town treasurer, in the same notion, works from quarter to quarter with all his bills and excise taxes and real estate and stormwater and stuff like that, and lives in that world. And we really don't have an umbrella for which to capture all of this stuff, coordinate efforts with the school, I think Leroy Walker of the Town Government Study Committee said it best, when we would be able to tie in the school department's budget and future with a dotted line approach, understanding that the school committee helps set forth their budget. So it's something that I agree with. The 2013 DOR report, which you probably heard from the Town Government Study Committee, asked for 3 executive summaries: strong town administrator, check the box, ATA HR Director Paige Eppolito, who preceded me, and the third piece of that executive branch, if you will, would be the assistant town administrator, CFO position. So I fully support it. I think it's something, especially with fire buildings looming in our future, potential school space needs, teen center, things like that, that we don't really have someone that's looking over the future financial reporting for the town. So I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, if I'm repeating things that were said by the Town Government Study Committee, but I fully support it, just from what I've learned in 22 months in town government. In Boston, we had a CFO, and it was very successful in not only looping in the capital improvement projects of all of the interested parties, but also tying in the school budget, which can be, a large portion of your budget.
One of the questions that we discussed was the transition. You have an elected treasurer transitioning over to a CFO who's appointed, and how that transition will be managed. That process generated some concerns and some questions. So rather than debate it without clarification from you, we thought we would wait.
Sure, yeah, so we had multiple discussions. The Town Government Study Committee met with all of my board members. They met with the audit team at Powers and Sullivan. They met with the town accountant. They met with myself and Rick Neely, the chair of the Town Government Study Committee, actually sat down with the treasurer. Treasurer McAuliffe, who has done a wonderful job in this town, voiced his concern and would prefer to be an elected position. And that's the way the conversation went. Rick explained the process to him, that if this town meeting article should pass town meeting, it would then be put on the referendum in April, at which point the town treasurer, which is a one-year election, would also be on. So if that referendum should pass, should it get through town meeting and get on the referendum and pass, then April of 2020 would be the first year of the appointed treasurer. And we did have a very brief conversation at the end of our meeting with Mr. McAuliffe. Again, he would prefer to be elected. He's been elected since he got here, doing a wonderful job. It's just that whole umbrella piece where we would ask that not only the town accountant and the town treasurer, but the IT department report up to the CFO. It's just a model that we see, and the Town Government Study Committee has seen in many private and public entities these days, where the treasurer reports up to another employee.
Are there any questions?
I just want to add a second part of there's a little bit of consternation on that, is that we are, having worked for the town personally for 30 some odd years, almost 3.5 decades, I'm very cognizant of the fact, as is Michael and down the board members, and I discussed this with the Town Government Study Committees, that we're talking about a person's livelihood who currently is our elected town treasurer, and I just think we need to be very sensitive and careful. It's what he does for a living, and I just want to be very careful on how we address this with him moving forward. It'd be an awful thing to wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're out of work, and I just want to be... Plus, he brings a great deal of institutional knowledge, but I have known and have understood, going back to when I was chief, that the size and the enormity and the complexity of the financial day-to-day and long-term here requires this type of... It just... You'll see this, for those of you who knew, you're going to see, especially, as Michael said, last year was a relatively easy budget process because we came off a significant override. Mm-hmm. If you go back to 2 and 3 years prior to that, where we had contingent and non-contingent budgets and one-time wish lists and cuts and cuts and cuts, that's been more the norm than what last year was. And that will begin, it may not happen this year, and you and I talked about, by 21 and 22, you'll start to see it again. I mean, healthcare costs, all of it, just they place an inordinate amount of pressure on the budget, and that's why, from a fiscal responsibility, this is the reason, starting with the DOR, the Town Government Study Committee, and I was one who, I listened an awful lot before I accepted it and said, okay, I get this, and I do get where
I
you're
think the
going with it.
committee is sensitive to that. Certainly, we recognize very acutely the need for sophistication, financial sophistication, particularly as we're going into issues of the nature that we're looking at the fire station, maintenance of the buildings, a new school building potentially, and resistance to additional overrides that none of us, if we had a choice, would want to see. But that having been said, and we are also sensitive to the transition, but we also recognize a person running for election, unopposed or not, always runs the risk annually of losing the job. And that's a real issue too. But anyway, I'll open it up for questions. Tom?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, preface by saying, I think most, if not all, of this committee supports the idea of a chief financial officer. It kind of goes without saying, you know, but, I realize it's gonna be at least a little bit of a battle, if not a big battle, to get it through. But one of my questions is, the last time we had a big change was when you came in, Mike, you know, the change to a strong town administrator.
Whose
and-
idea was that?
No idea. And in that article that was drafted, and we worked with the Government Study Committee on it as well, that really laid out all in the article itself, all the duties and responsibilities of the position. This one doesn't as much, so I'm concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about coupling the two. It's almost two articles in one. One is to have a CFO, and the other article is to have an appointed treasurer. Both are controversial. Either one kills him. Why not go for one and the other?
I think it's the work that the Town Government Study Committee did,
Or
understanding
having two articles.
that, yeah, that's something that I haven't thought about, but just they presented it as one article because the research that they did showed that 80% of the communities of a similar population of our town had
Right.
appointed treasurers. And it was, I don't think it's necessarily a move to, put the treasurer in an awkward position, but rather make sure that that CFO person is able to report down and up through those three.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
But I understand your point. It just happens that the way they wrote the article and it was supported by the board is as one article.
Did you ask them this question?
I did not, because I just thought about it now as I read the article again. And then the final one is the concern that, and it doesn't really appear to be much of a stomach to push for it at this point. The fact that if you do get a CFO, he's only gonna control 50% of the budget at best. I mean, the school committee made it pretty clear last year, they call their own shots. Because I asked them specifically, do you work with the town administrator? And I got the answer, we're just fine doing what we're doing.
Right, but
Mr. Walker said
that
that
strong
as well.
town administrator legislation also talks about me presenting a balanced budget to my board and to this committee.
Right.
So there was dialogue then when Chair Walker was there. I've said before, probably one of the smartest town government people I've ever met, and he taught me so much during that first 5-month period when there was a chasm being divided between the town and the school side because there was a shortfall in the non-contingent budget.
Right.
Having said that, he was the one that directly was, I think you can quote him on saying it would be a dotted line to work with the school department in their budget and kind of, give that umbrella effect, not that necessarily that they report underneath,
Right.
like the IT director and the town accountant and town treasurer would, but that would be a quasi-relationship that may or may not be that dotted line there right now. And that many of the people on this committee may not remember, but the override fund in an ATA position that I opposed and tried to reallocate that money to another position. Having said that, I've kept that in abeyance, and that's the starting point for what would be a chief financial officer's salary.
Gwenda, you had a question.
Well, yeah, to Tom's point, fully in support of having a CFO position within the town. Some of my concerns are again, that there's two items in one, but also that we're being asked to approve a concept without having a dollar figure associated with it. It's kind of the part and parcel of the warrant committee is to understand the impact to the town financially from the position, whether it's just the salary of this particular position, which I understand has been held in abeyance and has been a source of funding that's been unresourced, but also looking at the entirety of the current financial structure and what flexibility there would actually be for the CFO to have a structure within the department, putting the treasurer aside, assuming that that works smoothly. Do you need a CFO on top of the current structure without reorganizing anything down below? Is that a necessary addition, or is there some restructuring that can happen down below because you've added this resource? And is there flexibility with unions being as they are that you
So
can
there
actually
is
work with that?
flexibility in the town accountant's office to move some people around and to move some money around. We don't have the exact specific dollar amounts, but we worked out some back of the envelope paper where we could get to, we were thinking $125,000 to $140,000 position, on the higher side probably, to get a qualified CFO to come in and manage the.
With no reductions to additional, to folks who are currently
You're
staffed.
talking
That
about
would
head
be a-
count, Wendy?
Yeah, head count and dollar
And dollar
count,
figure.
is that a
No, because
net
we have that
add?
position, that ATA position, but we'd have to move some stuff around on the accounting department side.
Just to follow up to your question, so going back to what Tom had referred to when we created the town administrator model, the strong town administrator, even though there were many things that were outlined and thought, the money part wasn't part of the article, wasn't part of the, that was done strictly by the board and the candidates when they hired him, when they brought Mr. Dennehy on board. First gave Marie Fagan and then transitioned to when Michael took over when she retired, but I don't see that part of it going into town meeting as being, but.
It's just our role to look at
Yeah, I know, I
the
get that, I get
financial
that.
impact of these
And
things.
it's obviously, when we got to that point, that's when you would negotiate high, go the person will come to you and we would have to
Right,
have
then the
a
train's out of
person
the
there.
station.
But I think would be getting out there a little too far ahead if we
Yeah.
put a dollar amount on it right now.
Jonathan, you have a
Not to
question?
disagree, but I don't know if this board actually does get into individual, when you ask for a new cop, you don't ask for how much they're gonna be paid. Yeah, that's a budget discussion in my mind.
Which will come to you.
Which we'll
It
see
We'll come back to
ultimately,
you.
I'm
It will
sure.
come in, just,
Yeah,
I just,
we think we've identified some redundancies
Yes.
that can help with funding this position for.
Now, does the article does not specifically name Chief Financial Officer as a title? Is that essential to enact
I
this?
don't think it is because it's called something else in the DOR report and it's
Yes.
called other things in other towns. I think the Town Government Study Committee identified four or five different titles. I think Arlington just went to the CFO model and it's not even called.
So the function will be that of a Chief Financial Officer, but the title will be Treasurer?
be multiple. It could be whatever we come up with the time we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the textbook was driven from the DOR report.
Yes.
If you read that DOR report, which I don't have with me now, that encapsulates what the town government study researched and what I identified that could be the fix for. I don't see an problem. I say more of an opportunity.
Do you have Rick coming back before you went on, Rick Neely coming back before you went on? No.
We could, but we don't. He was here, we did a number on poor Rick.
I mean, they're multiple years into this.
Yes. Oh, yes.
This goes all, what was the DOR report, Tom? 13 or 14?
2013.
Yeah, 13,
Yeah.
and it goes.
Brian, you have a question?
Just quickly, what was the prevalence of CFO roles in the towns that the study showed? I think you indicated 80% of towns have
80% appointed,
appointed.
20% elected in
I thought you-
communities similar
okay.
to Milton with 25 to 30,000.
Okay, I thought you said 80% had treasurers, but I was
Oh,
wondering.
sorry, no, I believe they all have treasurers, but
Yeah, by statute, I believe, you still have a
Okay.
treasurer.
yeah.
Just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Chris, I'm sorry.
I'm actually, this issue about money alerted me to sort of a different issue that I have, not an issue that I have, but really a question. So, as I understand how the article functions, if the article is voted on by town meeting, then it's approved, then there was going to be a later amendment to the general bylaw. So I think somebody said referendum, I don't know if that was the right word, but
Yes.
it is a referendum. So can you just, so that's going to, the reason I ask is because this is very general. and like, for example, includes without limitation, increasing scope and responsibility, so it's, a lot of it is sort of like a vague theory, which is fine. Am I right that the idea is that then there will be a fairly well spelled out
Job
bylaw? Yeah, essentially that's going to articulate exactly what the job description is going to be.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the town government study committee, but I don't think they wanted to put the cart before the horse. I think that first, the referendum, it has to go to town meeting.
Sure.
The referendum has to pass.
Yeah.
The treasurer then has to go from elected to appointed.
Uh-huh.
And then you have that year in between, right? On April, whenever the election is this coming April, the following morning, you'll know whether or not if you're going to have a CFO model in town.
Right, but I guess where I'm getting hung up is where does the meat come? I mean, where's the beef? What is where does this get fleshed out? Or is this all that it's going to be, and then somebody's going to be the CFO, and then they're going to have carte blanche? I mean, in other words, this can't be it, right? There's got to be some greater description of what the job description actually is.
John, I'm going to turn to town council. John, do you know, can you answer that question?
Good evening.
Hi, John. John Flynn, Town Council. John, thank you for coming tonight.
Mr. Chair, we're also joined by Selectman Collins.
Oh, how nice. Thank you for coming.
Hey, John, come on in. Hey, John.
I think there are a couple of ways to address that. One would be by a bylaw amendment. One would be by an amendment to the personnel bylaw with an accompanying job description. So the detail would be provided in at least one of those two options.
When you say would be, you mean will be, like it has to be.
Yes,
Right? Okay.
yes.
That's really my question, is that there has to be some way to flush it out. Okay,
But that's down the road a bit.
that's down there.
Can I ask a sort of
Please.
follow-up question to that? So there's a big difference between having a specific job description at some point and having more specific information before it gets essentially voted on, ratified, before you have the referendum. Is it going to happen before that, or is it something that happens, that gets fleshed out after everybody's already approved it, and then it just goes as an internal process? I guess, are we gonna be able to know the details before it's the final approval?
Yes, before the final approval. I can't speak for the town government study committee, but remember the position would have to be budgeted. It would have to be added to the personnel bylaws.
And that would come before us
At
ultimately.
least in those two instances, it would be fleshed out before anyone ever sits in that position, yes.
So effectively, what we're doing is recommending or not recommending to the town meeting to permit the referendum to go forward.
Okay, all right, that's clear.
Two last questions, and then we've got to move on.
John,
Actually, Tom, Clinton.
Go ahead.
Two questions. One, you're trying to change it from an elected position to a appointed position, right?
Treasurer.
Say it again?
The treasurer.
The treasurer. Which is the CFO, or?
No, two different things.
Okay, okay. And what's the CFO relationship going to be with the school committees?
Nothing.
So I don't think it's necessarily nothing, Tom. I don't think nothing's the correct
Budgetary.
word here.
Or is there any thoughts on that? Just
Oh,
If I remember right, Mr. Walker, last week when we did ask that, sort of, to not put words in his mouth, said there was sort of like going to be a kind of gentleman's agreement for cooperation. That's not gonna be any sort of like mandatory or anything if parties happen to disagree, so. But I think there's gonna be some sort of cooperation
Well, what's
between
your
the
take
school
on that?
budget
Or
and
what do
the
you
Right, well,
CFC.
I always point back to the capital improvement committee and this committee here, where everything gets flushed through
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
They can present, and I can present, but ultimately, it's this committee and the capital
Yeah.
improvement
And the
committee
town meeting.
that make the decisions, and
Town
ultimately, town
meeting,
meeting,
right.
as to what gets funded and how. It's just, I think it's a more coordinated effort by someone on a day-to-day basis
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not rolling the dice every year, hoping that Governor Baker gives us 3.5% and $800,000.
But the CFO will have no authority over the school budget other than what they
No.
agreed to.
Right.
It just out of cooperation.
Or any school finance.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, other than what they
Point
agreed
of
to.
fact, this is being constructed, but let's remember,
Or
it
accounting,
does
yeah.
have to come, it
Yes,
comes
but
through
all
us.
of it ultimately comes to us.
And I can't
So-
imagine that the chief financial officer, if appointed by the town, wouldn't understand the dynamics of that budget and how we work. So I would imagine he's going to have quite a bit of influence.
Yes, but just to make it clear, what the
Exactly.
question was, is like,
These,
no,
I mean,
he's not gonna have any
I think
authority
we're
over it.
anticipating a lot of the questions that we're going to hear at town meeting as
Yes.
well, reasonably so. Tom, you had a question.
Yeah, John, would this be considered a charter change? A charter amendment, or
I don't believe so.
no? Even though we're going from elected to appointed, that's not a charter change?
I think that's correct, yes.
I think I asked that question as well when I met with them.
That was, I was told the same thing, there's no charter change.
Your charter, remember, is limited to town meeting essentially. It's a charter by special act. It's not a
Yes.
whole world charter in the sense of some towns and charter governmental structures in the charter. It really is limited to town meeting and the moderator.
So can I just, oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, I just want to follow up on the school part of it. As Tom knows, in the strong town administrator, we're in a relatively a infancy. Would you agree? I mean, we're in.
Sure.
But from the school aspect, even though they do act independently, I think all of us, and at least for me, in the short time I've been chair, I've had a great relationship with Dr. Donahue as far as having discussions about, we need to look at the big pie, because when we get to town meeting, or when everyone comes through here, we are one community. 02186 is the one commonality amongst all of us, and I think that as time goes on, much of the, it won't be perfect, but I think that we are making progress in this area as far as our working relationships and looking at things big picture versus, it's easy to be parochial, and just think in your own fiefdom, and it just doesn't really work that well when you're looking at a whole community, so.
Can I just add one more thing? So
Please.
Selectwoman Collins is here. Herself and Selectwoman Conlon have started a finance committee for the Board of Selectmen. And we're to meet with the school department tomorrow in an effort to coordinate finances going forward for FY '20.
I think
It's the
greater
preliminary-
coordination is a great
Right,
idea.
so it's a great idea by these folks to finally start to sit at the table before we receive the FY '20, right, to find out what they think might be a budget buster or what they might think be a problem.
Yeah.
All the collective bargaining agreements are up this year, stuff like that. So kudos to Selectwoman Collins and Selectwoman Conlon. It's not gonna take place tomorrow because the school committee's, finance committee's meeting tonight, I believe, but if not, next Thursday, the following Thursday. So it's an open dialogue already that we didn't have in 19 and 18 was kind of thrust upon us. So it's a work in progress, but I think it's very productive and proactive.
Go ahead, please, one more, and then
Just,
we're going
do
to
you
move along.
foresee, maybe silly question, but do you foresee the citizens of Milton having any issue with this being an elected position, a change into an elected position to an appointed position? I mean, do you have any thoughts on what, because they normally, they're
Yeah.
the ones to be able to vote on that, so.
I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about that.
I haven't either,
All right.
Well, the town meeting will give us a sense of that one.
Yeah,
For sure. I mean, I have no doubt
I think
we'll
town meeting will
hear,
definitely, I
we'll
think,
have
But
more
just,
sides of this than we thought would
So you were
exist.
considering them and what they may have
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I think we should bring this to a vote because we do have a lot to do. So the article at hand is to see if the town will vote to create more centralized professional financial management as presented by the Board of Selectmen. Can I have a motion to recommend this, or I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to recommend this to the town meeting.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Any opposed? Approved. This will be
Abstain from that one.
Abstained, one abstention.
Thank you.
So this will be Article 15, as we are terming our index, on the Chief Financial Officer position will be recommended for approval to the town meeting. Okay, thank you all very much. While we have you here, there are a couple of other questions that came up on things as broad as the plastic bag ban and the special, the retired police officers just being appointed to special officers. As a former chief, we thought you might have an opinion about this. Because we tabled it after Chief King came in to get the input from the selectmen.
so I'm very clear to say that, well, I was the chief for 10 years, Chief King is the chief now.
Understood.
And as Michael and John both know, this is something we both agree on. This is a practice that is, we're actually in the minority as far as being one of the communities that does not do this right now. Everyone, the only one left that is not done it yet is the city of Boston, which is in the process, I believe, of looking at it as well, but everyone else can't. Randolph, Quincy. My wife, who's a deputy superintendent of Cambridge, just ran that. We actually took a lot of their language from them. They just put it through their city council, a home rule petition there, and they started, I think 20 officers started the first day about a month ago. There are several benefits to this. First is the public safety, as it gives the chief a larger pool to draw from. Currently, when you can't fill with Milton officers, the first thing you're doing is you're going outside. We have agreements with Quincy, Randolph, Canton. I'm sure if you ride around town, sometimes you'll see, you may even see state troopers sometimes doing details. From a financial aspect of it, there's a 10% administrative fee per hour on every hour of private duty work that comes to the treasury of the town. When you use an outside entity, that town or that community gets the money. Just as in, like, when our officers work outside of Milton, we get the money, but we're a very busy community, so we're here more than we are away. So that 10% administrative fee with retired officers goes into your coffers, not another community's treasury. And the third thing is, these are your vested people. I mean, these are people who are vested from your community who have personal knowledge, they have a great deal of understanding of the clientele, the people who live here, the residents, the issues, and it's only a 5-year window. You can only work until 70. At 70, that's it, it's over. It gives you an additional 5 years, but it will give you a pool to draw from, and I do support this wholeheartedly. Michael and I have talked about this a lot. Chief King and I have talked about this. I know he was for it, and I think that it's just a prudent move for us to make, and this is the right way to do it, using doing a special act in the legislature.
Are there any questions for,
Didn't this pass?
we did not vote on it.
Yes, it did.
I thought in the minutes.
Did we vote on it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we tabled it.
Don't undo it,
I have a
then.
note that we tabled it. Okay, I
I think it was the
apologize.
fire one that we.
Oh, the fire one, I know we
Yes,
tabled, but I have a
on
note that we tabled this one too. My error, I'm sorry. Okay, well, we
All
got
right.
that explanation, so that's terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just wanted your.
We wanted your opinion, I know we
It's
wanted,
okay.
I know we
Sorry.
wanted your opinion.
Okay.
Okay, the next issue was the plastic bag ban.
Okay. So, this is and this is not, and I really give Selectwoman Conlon, Katie Conlon a great deal of work, because her and
Just came in, by the
Hillary
way.
White, well, she's here. You want to take one? Okay. All right. Kick me if I go wrong. Plastic bags are one of the main issues for any community. The use of them, they're inundated in our community. I just read a great article the other day. Has anyone seen the story about the floating plastic sea in the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah.
It's the size of a city. While we do not have a South Shore Plaza or a Dedham Mall or Legacy Place, we do have stores, and all of them sell those plastic bags. This is a process that's been put forth in so many places. One of the things that I really learned a lot about is because, we're big on recycling here, and, we think recycle, but that type of plastic bag cannot be recycled. And it actually jams up the recycling machine, causes a big problem for the recyclers. So the move today, and I mentioned to Michael, was it, who's the city councilor? Not
Matt O'Malley.
Matt O'Malley, who drafted their bylaw, their ordinance in the city. He actually was on a conference call with Hillary, Katie, Michael, and myself, outlining to us. It's just a very smart thing for us to do. Our biggest user would be the Milton Marketplace area. Personally, I've gone and met with Michael Magnosa. He kind of knows this is the way of the future. The only thing that he did ask is, if you pass this, don't do it in 2 weeks. And I was very clear that this would be sometime next year. But just to give you an example of the rest of the world, I speak often about the privileges I've had to travel outside of this country, representing this country. And in 2 recent travels, one to Ireland and then one to Israel, both countries, you go to you can't get a plastic. Either you buy a bag, a reusable bag, or carry it out in your arms. That's how far they've gone on it. So we're really kind of behind the 8 ball on this, and I think this is really a prudent move that took a lot of time. Hillary did a great job on this, and As I say, Katie spearheaded this, and I support this 100%, as I know Michael does. I think it's a good thing for our community, and I say it's a progressive thing. We're not doing it like overnight, but trash is a big issue. As we go into next year, and we don't have to talk about it now, but when our contract runs up, is it next year?
June of 19.
Trash is a big issue. If you Google or read about recycling in the world and how things are going, it's, no one has a dump anymore. And if those of you who lived here remember when, and yet our barrels are full every single week, and we see trash everywhere. And if you go to our park barrels are full. So this is definitely just one step more in maintaining the quality of life for our community. So I think it's a very good move.
Are there any questions? Any further discussion on this? Tom, please.
First, the language in this article was obviously lifted from a bunch of different places. Because I don't know what a 4 mil thick and
Right.
all that other stuff is.
So, exactly, there are certain bags which are thicker and that can be recycled. So, it's that thin, that we see at every store that can't be. And that's what we're, Stop Shop, Star, CVS, that's what we're trying to stop. So that's why you see references to thickness with regard to plastics.
So a thicker plastic bag can be recycled,
Yes.
and one can't?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Is that what we're trying to,
Chris,
There are other examples, like the bag that your dry cleaning comes in.
Yes.
That's not a
exempt.
problem. If you separate meats and fish at the market, that's not a problem. It's those white 3-4 mil bags. If you go to a liquor store, that bag's heavier, that bag's more recyclable. If you go to Dunkin' Donuts, you come out with a box of Joe, that bag is recyclable. It's the smaller ones, and they really do damage at the recycling facility.
Chris, you had a question?
sorry, is that still trying to, you're trying to, for us to use that as well?
That's the one we're banning.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go to the Stop and Shop on
Stop and Shop,
Truman,
CVS.
you can get triple bagged with those. On January 1st, those will be gone. Boston is enacting it on January 1st. So.
Chris,
What about
do you have a question? We have a question.
I do, sorry. I'm gonna be forsaken on the enforcement. So first of all, so violation actually isn't defined. And it's not clear to me, again, I think the assumption is that violation is simply if a customer is given a single plastic bag. That's my assumption, it's not clearly laid out, so that's a smaller point. The bigger point is this. This bylaw shall be, looking at right under section 5 enforcement, this bylaw shall be enforced by any means available in law and equity by the code enforcement officer. I don't know what means are available in law and equity for the code enforcement officer to actually enforce it, number one. Number two, why isn't it that the code enforcement officer can't simply give a ticket? Or why isn't there some other more specific way to enforce this provision?
You all right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I'll give you a little bit of enforcement history of all types. So we have, criminal enforcement, break a car, but there are codes that exist in this community now, everything from smoking a marijuana cigarette in public to, even though it's legal now, to animal enforcement ordinances. This will just be another one where discretion is a big part. I don't see, I think education is going to be the bigger tool in this than, hard-fisted enforcement. But I think you had to give some type of leeway for enforcement to be carried out, just in case you get in a group. But I don't see it being a big problem. I think education will be the bigger thing, education for the store, the stores that are within, the establishments that are within our community and having them adhere to it. It may take a little time, change is never easy, but I think I'm comfortable with it, I'll be okay with it. We asked a lot of questions about enforcement ourselves.
I'm actually not comfortable with it, if I could just follow up. So that actually to me is problematic, because from my perspective, it actually doesn't actually put retailers on effective notice about what they can expect with regard to whatever a violation might be. So
Chris, give an example of that. Who's going to catch them in the act and what happens to them?
Well, apparently only the code enforcement officer is, or somebody who reports to the code enforcement officer.
Who could be a private citizen
I
saying
no
they've
idea.
got there, or the cop
actually
that
don't
comes?
No, I think that would be someone within his office, someone within inspectional services. That's what, it's not a crime, it wouldn't be the police department.
Right,
It's not
because law and equity.
Right, it's not a crime, so.
But I guess that's my point, is that Like, I actually don't know how this ends up being, I don't know how it ends up being enforced. I don't know how, I think it's a good provision. I like the idea. I just am very concerned that this enforcement provision doesn't quite come up to snuff.
Chris, it doesn't specifically say that it's the business that has to pay.
Yeah, that was another point.
So, to your point
Yeah.
of the ambiguity, are you gonna be fining the person at the fruit center who happens to give over the plastic bag, or the store itself?
I don't think they were gonna have
That's
them
not the
anymore. They're not even gonna have them anymore.
Right, so I
That's
think
why
the
I'm not
concern-
even that worried about that part of it.
That's great, as long as everybody who thinks that way is currently enforcing laws, but I think the concern is if it's phrased that broadly, then you can have somebody arbitrarily being stricter with the enforcement of it that isn't here at this table today, that isn't in elected office today, and so having neatly drafted bylaws is helpful.
Clinton.
Are there any cases where the citizens would be in violation, or would they be fined? That's
I don't see how
Question
they
I
could be
have.
on this. no.
like if they bring in a plastic bag from somewhere, not the store, Milton Market, just,
It's not a crime.
okay.
This is a ban for establishments within the community, not citizens.
John, do you have
Just
a
for clarity,
response?
just a new thing, thank you.
The regulated conduct is in section 3, A and B. It's the retail establishment that's in violation of it if they violate either one of them. I think that's clearly stated. The penalties are clearly stated. The process can be taken to court, but that's true of our general bylaws in general. It's nothing different from how civil violations are enforced to date, and this would be consistent with that. But they are on notice of what can happen if they violate it. I think typically they might be given a first notice, but you see the gradual increase in fines there. So, but the regulated conduct is limited to A and B, and it's the retail establishment, not an individual.
Tom.
Just a comment more than anything else, because I do support it, but at firsthand knowledge, the town of Dennis last year, and I'm a resident of Dennis as well, somewhat, but put it in this past year, and I can tell you, there is 100% compliance with it. I've never seen anybody, I've been in almost every retail store in Dennis, and nobody uses plastic bags. It's sort of remarkable. They even went to the point of even the Dunkin' Donuts now, it's paper cups.
Yeah.
I think going to Mr. Hart's concern is, I think if any establishment, be it the big one or the little one, were to do it, we would know about it very quickly. And that's why I said the discretion of the code enforcement people. I think that it's gonna be the bigger part, will be to educate them and then educate the community as to why to do it. But I think you're gonna find broader support for this than you realize. I think people, as Tom says.
Mike?
Upon Selectwoman Conlon's advice, we reached out to the Chamber of Commerce. I spoke with Darrell Elliott. Personally,
Yeah.
they brought it up at their chamber meeting in July, and it was
And they're cool with this?
full approval. Yeah. Again, to Chair Wells's point, give us some time to get rid of the bags we have.
Yeah,
We have
sure.
a supply of them, but.
Is there any other discussion that we need to have? Doug?
This would apply to, maybe temporary retail things, like, or food trucks or something like that? So they would
Yes.
have to know before coming to town as part of like super license or something, okay?
Everyone's been
Kathleen, do you have a
contacted,
question?
farmer's market,
Yeah.
everyone has been made aware of this.
Okay.
Just
Kathleen,
another
please.
question. We went to the fruits and vegetables section, and they have thinner bags than the ones you get at checkout. So don't those
Those are
Those
allowed.
Those are exempted,
Those are
right?
allowed.
But wouldn't you want to exclude those as well?
For some reason, the milliliter on that bag is works through the automated
okay.
screener at the facility. It's a very good question, but it's just that white plastic bag that you see
It's a
coming
very good
out.
question, so I can
Yeah.
put that in the recycling bin now?
You can.
Ken?
If there are no other questions or comments, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend, or will entertain a motion on this article to see if the town will vote to amend the general bylaws by adopting a new bylaw entitled Plastic Bag Ban to help protect the environment from plastic pollution in the forms set forth below, which we've all seen.
Second.
Second. Any discussion further?
Yes.
Please.
just one thing. I plan to vote no, not because I don't like it, I do like it, but because I think the enforcement provision is vague. Can somebody talk me out of it?
Well, the enforcement was for just the retail. I mean, that was my question, who's gonna get?
That part I get. I mean more how it's actually be.
I think
the
it's the
law
same
and
basic
equity.
language that's in all zoning or in all bylaws that have enforcement provisions.
With the exception of chapter 6, which is the police bylaws. This does not fall into that.
So I guess quickly, if someone's at Milton Market, there's gonna be an enforcement officer there that would have to see it happen right away?
See themselves. Oh, I don't know if they'd have to see it right away, because it's not a crime.
No,
But
that's what I mean.
I think, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? That maybe.
I don't think it'll be hard to,
Well, would
There's a
somebody be able to
proactivity to
report?
it and a reactivity
Right.
to it. So,
Right.
as
I
Bert
saw
Chamber
that.
has worked his way through many of the code enforcement issues in town, as he goes to react to a complaint that's come in through a constituent,
Right.
he then looks around the area and finds other stuff being proactive. So it may be someone calling saying, hey, they gave me a plastic bag they weren't supposed to, which we appreciate, and it's also him walking into these establishments and taking a look around as a part of his day-to-day operations. As Chair Common, as Selectman Common just mentioned, a lot of this stuff came from the Weston model, and Weston adopted it quite some time ago. Some people use a Board of Health representative to do it. We thought the code enforcement officer would be a little more prudent, as he's in and about, he's on the road a lot more every day.
Okay, any other discussion? Discussion is closed. All in favor?
Aye,
Opposed?
didn't sell them.
Abstention? So let's see, opposed once again. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Opposed, you said opposed.
Opposed, yes. Any abstentions? Article passes. Just before this article, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not related to this article, but last year we approved capital expenditure for the bins.
Monday.
Where are they?
Monday. Yeah.
Yeah,
Monday they come.
there you go.
Yeah, 17 Patricia Drive, the Milton Times will be there as we hand out our first recycling cart.
All right.
These are the big ones, Mike.
Big ones, yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, I bought a couple of
Yeah,
years ago.
great.
Any questions,
so
call
did I
Public
when I
Works,
moved in.
898-4900. There's some frequently asked questions on a door knocker you'll get, so it's gonna take about 2 weeks to deliver to the entire town.
We have a couple of other
Great.
questions on two other articles. Article 11, which is the one preceding this, that discusses the addition of 2 members, including the fire chief and a member of the town fire department, to the fire station building committee. There were a couple of questions, as it's proposed by the selectmen. There were a couple of questions about the methodology and the efficiency of this move at the last meeting. We would like to have your perspective on this.
so.
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead, you go
Take
Take your
first. Go
time.
ahead.
But you have 7 minutes between the two of you.
Just very briefly, I was approached when the committee was formed last year, and myself and Chair Burns, not knowing that we're each heading towards the town moderator, had suggested to him that the fire department have a vote, not necessarily a voice. You can always have a voice by sitting in all these meetings, but I would appreciate them having a vote at it. Their institutional knowledge, they're there 24/7. Most of them 30, 40-year veterans. I surely defer to them. I will say, thanks to the town moderator and the fire building committee for allowing them into that meeting, sometimes albeit, 20 or 30 firefighters at a time. So they did welcome them in to these meetings last year. But yeah, I would fully support that. I did hear the question about the chief being the chair, perhaps. I don't think I'd be in favor of that.
Right.
I think they don't need to lead the discussion, but be a part of it, as each member of this committee is.
So I concur 100%, and I'll just give you a little bit of historical. You have a unique thing in that you're one of the rare communities that you currently have a fire chief whose dad was also the fire chief in this community, as my father was also police chief in this community. But one of the most unique things that I ever learned from my father was, and this goes back to John Cronin, my father was actually on the police station building committee. And he was appointed to the police station building committee partially because they had just built this building. And they wanted a police station that would be reflective of the look as well as the operation of the community. And even today, people come to me and ask me questions, especially Bill Ritchie probably asked me the most about the building and the makeup and just things about it that I took from my own father. I sit as our liaison to the Fire Station Building Committee. I think Brian Walsh is doing a great job. They're being very methodical, and they're putting a great deal of time on this, but I think, I didn't know about the second, but I 100% feel that Chief Grant, who is at every single meeting, should have a voice in this. He really should. He brings a great deal to it. And if he feels that a member of the fire department should be, I agree with that as well. And I don't think it can hurt us. I think in the end, we're doing something, and I think Tom said it first, for 100 years. So let's do it right. And having their voice as a voting voice, I think can only help us.
Any questions on this? We talked about this a bit. Kathleen?
Chief Grant said last time that he didn't believe the other 9 were in favor of this.
The other
The
9.
9
Members of the
people,
committee.
current nine.
Yeah.
You know, I've not had that discussion with, and Chair Brian Walsh has never said that to me, but there's some, I don't know, it could be, I don't know, but I was, having spent my whole life in
Yeah.
public safety, and having, as well as during my 10 years as chief here, sitting on the Governor's Homeland Security and working on millions of dollars in projects, Homeland Security projects and public safety projects throughout this state, I think having his voice and his vote and his institutional knowledge, as well as whoever else they've decided from their department, can only help us in the long run.
I agree, I think it makes sense. I was
It'd
just
be like,
surprised by
it'd just
these
be like
comments.
building a hospital without having a doctor there. I just couldn't see doing that, you know, just.
Any other Tom?
I guess more a question for John. Would it be out of scope if we made a recommendation that included that the chief could not be chair of that committee?
I've never heard he wanted, did you really hear he wanted to be
No,
chair?
I don't think
No, but
In fact, the opposite.
This would be this would be an addition, an amendment to this. How do we do that, John, if we decide we wanted to?
In other words, could the recommendation, because it's limiting the scope, it's not expanding it.
Well, I think you would have the authority to do that within the scope because it's a town meeting originated committee. So it would be, you would just amend, if your recommendation were as suggested, then included in your vote tonight. I think would be within the scope, yeah.
To include the caveat that the chief
That neither be chair, yeah?
could not function as chair of the committee.
I don't think that would work.
It's an interesting idea.
Would we have to make specific language?
I think we'd probably have to include that in the recommendation. I would think that would be wise. Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, we can construct a motion for this particular article, which we've termed Article 11, to see if the town will vote to amend the vote of 2017 annual town meeting, et cetera, to increase the Fire Station Building Committee from 9 members to 11, the 2 additional members being the fire chief and a member of the Milton Fire Department.
I will make a motion on, we are calling Article 11, to see if the town will vote to amend the 2017 annual town meeting, Article 14, increasing the number of the Fire Building Committee from 9 to 11, 2 additional members to be the fire chief and a member of the Town Milton Fire Department, provided that neither of the fire chief nor the fire department member could be appointed or elected to chair of that committee.
Provided that, so following the last sentence, and to act on anything relating thereto, comma, provided that neither the fire chief.
After fire department.
Are we going to get ready to act on anything relating thereto? I think we need to have that there, don't we?
Put it before that, Mr.
Yeah.
But
Put it
his
before
clause
that?
would come
Okay.
before.
Yeah.
Provided that neither the fire chief nor the member,
Department member, you want to use the word department member?
which,
Department member.
Department.
Department member.
or the department member will act as chair of the committee.
Or could be elected or appointed chair of the committee.
Chair, provided that neither the fire chief nor the department member may be elected / appointed,
Or otherwise serve.
or otherwise
Serve as chair.
serve as the committee's chair. Okay, so we would read this as written, and then at the end, and to act on anything relating thereto. So the two additional members would be the fire chief and a member of the Town of Milton Fire Department, provided that neither the fire chief nor the department member may be elected/appointed or otherwise serve as the committee's chair, comma, and to act on anything relating thereto. That is the motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion?
Yes.
This is just, I'm sorry, just for clarification, this is just discussion of the motion. Of
Yes.
the motion. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'm not sure I totally agree with not having, or putting in the language that prohibits the chief or the town member from being able to be elected the chairman of this particular committee. I mean, I think it just, for me, it sends the wrong message that we want you to attend, be able to vote, but, you know, you'll never be kind of like in charge or lead the group in. I mean, what kind of precedent does that set for other similar committees? And also the fact that, do we really want to, like, get into how the committee gets made up, or do we just want to allow the committee to be constituted? I mean, this is probably, for me, a step too far. I mean, I think I understand what we're trying to do, trying to not see that the chief gets to be the chair so that he can't rig the committee, but I think this for us, for the Warrant Committee, is a step too far.
Chris?
So I'm actually coming at this from the opposite direction. I actually think two is too many, shouldn't have a voting right, and absolutely shouldn't be chair. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'll tell you why, and because I think this gets to your question. So I absolutely think that it makes sense to have the chief of the fire department as a member of the committee. I absolutely think that his or her vote is, or no, not vote, say is extremely valuable. And I actually don't think that the committee can effectively do its work without the input and information from the chief of the fire department. I don't think a vote or chairpersonship is appropriate, because I think that the committee needs to be able to do its work without too much influence from the fire department. In other words, I don't think it's not the best analogy I can come up with is civilian control of the military, and I realize that that's an overwrought analogy, but it gets to the idea that there really should be a body that's independent of the department, that's being affected. So that, I think, is the reason for the chair. It's also why I think two is too many, because I realize that I'm previewing a later issue, Mr. Chair. I hope you'll indulge. Two is too many because I actually think that can overwhelm opinion, because I think it's actually unlikely they're going to come with divergent views, and why I think having a chair, having them be chair would be just too much power, for lack of a better word.
So, I'm sorry, I wasn't here the last two meetings, so I'm coming from behind. How are decisions made on this committee? Is it majority?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he is, speaking as, because I don't have the voting, I'm a non-voting member as well. He has no vote. And having been there, I can see why he does need to have a vote. So that's part of the reason why I do agree with this, seeing it operational and functionally. You're building, you really need, sometimes you get to that crossroad where really his vote needs to count. It really does.
Doug?
Well, just maybe this would help clarify. It's if this passes and there are two new members, the chief and a fireperson, would this committee need to, in effect, reconstitute itself, like re-elect a chair, or would they just add them in? Because otherwise, this clause that we're having would be directly relevant, that the chief can't serve as the committee chairman. I just don't know how
I think the
fire
chair was
station
appointed by the
committee
moderator, as is this chair. I think
Okay,
it's a moderator's
I just
appointment.
don't recall off the top of my head the constitution of it, of whether or not they elect their own or what happened.
It would not have to be.
I was actually elected by this committee. I was not appointed.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sorry,
appointed
okay.
to the
But I
committee.
mean, it's a moderator's committee,
Yeah.
and I believe the chair, I believe,
I don't know.
Okay, I
If they act as other
I don't know if they
committees
elect
of the
their own.
town, they could do it either way, but I believe they're all voting their own chairs in. I believe
Effectively, the
that's
two,
case.
though, flips a 4 minority into a 6 majority. So there is an there's an impact, if there's a.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to hear the counterpoint from the, if there is one, from the committee.
Well, this has been published and none of them have come, so I can't speak to that.
Fair enough.
Just say, I've not heard anything negative either, that none of them have come to me about it.
To answer the member's question, this would not require the reconstitution of the committee.
Okay, so it
It would be
wouldn't
up to the
automatically
committee.
potentially change the chair, so, okay.
I'm sorry?
It wouldn't automatically open up a change of the chairman of this
That
committee,
would be
okay.
up to the committee, yes.
If there's no other discussion, these are all very pertinent views and very valid views, and I'm sure we'll hear them at the town meeting. So the proposal is to amend Article 11 as stated. It's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's count this up now. Raise them up. I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favor.
This is just for the motion to amend.
To amend.
Yes.
Oh.
Motion to amend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All
I do.
opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed, 1. Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay. So we have the motion as amended. Is there someone who will make that motion?
The motion as.
We have the article as amended.
No, we just voted the recommendation.
We voted the amendment.
No, we voted the
We voted the amendment.
We
Now
voted
we
to
have to vote on the
agree to
Well, no,
recommendation.
we're not amending the article, that was the recommendation.
Oh,
You can't amend an article.
yeah.
So there is no amendment to the article, it's just, that was the recommendation.
Mr.
that I
Chair,
made a
if I
motion.
may, and my apologies, Tom, but I misunderstood that, and so my vote was not for the recommendation.
Okay.
in that.
We'll
Maybe
t-
you should
We'll
re-vote
re-vote. We'll re-vote
Okay,
if
but
that's the
what,
case.
I mean,
Do we have-
that was
Okay.
a motion to recommend
Okay.
on the article.
Okay.
That was my
To
question.
make,
Yes.
to make it clear and that
That's
do
what
I
I
need
thought I
to
was
move to
opposed.
reopen the vote?
Right.
I
Do
need
I
to
have a
make a
motion to
motion?
reopen the vote, please?
Is there a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're going to reopen this vote.
So, just so
The
we're all clear what
article
we're actually
has-
voting on.
Yes, the article that we're voting on is the language that includes that which is printed as Article 11 to us, provided that neither, with the addition provided that neither the fire chief nor the department member may be elected / appointed or otherwise serve as the committee's chair and to act on anything relating thereto. This is what will go to the town meeting.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Please.
Because of my misunderstanding, my thinking had been to actually offer a further amendment. Can I do so at this point?
Yes.
Okay. My further amendment is, relates to 2 different provisions. The first would be, rather than from 9 to 11 members, it would be from 9 to 10 members.
The rationale being, who are you going to keep
I
out?
think two folks from the fire department are too many, it should be the chief alone.
If we're going to a committee.
I'm sorry?
You don't
Oh,
need another
that's-
committee?
That's,
10.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
all right. All right, fine. In that case,
All right.
I'm definitely not voting.
Come
for
on
this article.
over, Chris.
No, this is
The
very
second,
legitimate.
is that it would be language to the effect of, and I apologize that's not perfect, is, the additional members would be non-voting members of the Fire Station Building Committee.
I believe they already are.
Is the chief already an ex officio member of
He
the
is.
committee?
He's already an ex officio
my-
member.
Um,
He's a non-voting member, as far as I know.
What about the additional member?
That is not so.
So,
Okay.
Presently, they have no voice, other than the chief as an ex
I
officio.
understand. I respect the position, I just disagree with it.
Reasonably so. Further discussion on the point. So,
He made I can either accept as a friendly or say no, and then you have to vote mine.
We can
Okay.
withdraw the right.
And- Yeah, but as I understand it, the purpose of the article is that the chief wants to be a voting member. That right now he is I don't know if he's officially a member, but he's certainly an advisor.
I don't believe he's a member.
He's not a member.
He's an advisor, and has the right to be at every meeting and has a voice.
Welcome.
I don't know if that's the same voice that you have as a member or not.
It is not.
No.
It is
Okay.
not.
So then I guess we could do that, make them both
Non-voting.
non-voting members. we could recommend that.
Can I ask a clarification? When you said it's not the same voice, is that because of no vote?
There's no vote, right?
Okay.
Yes,
So
no
that's-
vote.
Well, no, we're debating whether it be a no, you know, a member without a vote.
So he's only invited to the table when they ask him for his opinion.
No, pardon me, if he's a member.
He's at the
He's
table.
not a member.
No, he's not a
No,
member.
no,
He's not a
no,
member.
no, I'm addressing a different issue. If through this article, he is made a member, he may speak, he just may not vote. So he'll have more of a say.
Oh, no, he's gonna vote.
With my amendment.
Jonathan?
I mean, you see, are we heading down the road of, they presented this, the committee themselves is not coming to oppose it, and we're gonna head down the road of not letting town meeting vote on it?
Absolutely. If
Oh,
we
no,
vote
town meeting's gonna vote on it no matter what.
Absolutely not recommended if that's how we vote. Doesn't seem like we're going that way, but not at all.
That just,
One way or other, the town meeting will vote on it without our recommendation or amendment. So the question is, do we want to amend it this way? And do we want them to vote on what we're amending? And that's the question at hand, and I think that's what we should focus on. So the question is the amendment acceptable or not? The amendment to the amendment, I should say.
As a friendly amendment, that they be non-voting members. And the other reason I hesitate, and let me ask town council, if we pose a recommendation like this, whether it be voting, non-voting, I guess town meeting's only choice is to, unless they can pass a further amendment to negate our language, if town meeting does want these people to be voting members. I mean, the way we've got it worded right now, if they vote it down with our language, then the article doesn't pass and they're not voting members.
That's right.
If they voted in favor of it, the article passes and they're not voting members.
Right.
Well,
Can you do that?
well, this committee can recommend whatever it wants. You've created a situation where those who wish to have their voting members would have to do some parliamentary maneuvering to defeat your motion or amend it and get that motion before the body to make them voting members.
Right, exactly, yeah, yeah.
I believe that would happen.
Would our
I believe that would
recommendation
happen.
create confusion at town meeting? Because town meeting members cannot amend our recommendation, they just vote up or down our recommendation. But they can amend the article. Am I correct?
No, they amend the recommendation.
They can amend, okay, I didn't know if they
That's all.
amended the language or just,
Ah,
because we
okay.
usually say we accept or not. Okay.
So, the subject is at your decision right now. The motion's on the table.
I think that one, I won't accept as a friend, I can't, but I'm sorry, but I think it just goes a little too far, and I think it puts town meeting in a bad
Okay,
situation.
so if that's the case, we still are subject, we have to
We know to vote on that.
make the amendment, to the amendment, a motion.
Okay, yeah, and then the committee votes it up or down.
Right. So, Chris,
Shall I move, or do you need, what do you need?
I need the language for an
The language
amendment
is-
to amend the amendment that we're suggesting.
The language would be, the additional members may not be voting members of the Fire Station Building Committee.
As a separate sentence.
Sure.
The additional,
If that's clear enough to everybody.
the additional members may not be voting members.
And you can not serve as chair or.
Well, that's already.
already there.
That's
That's already there.
Put them
Okay,
titles.
so the amendment would be the language that we have discussed in our own amendment, followed by the additional members may not be voting members. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Second by anyone? Not hearing any second. Motion's been seconded. Discussion.
This is just
Go ahead, one at a time. I know everybody has an opinion.
Sorry, Wendy.
Any outcome from this fire station building committee, any recommendations about any actions or buildings or non-buildings or renovations would come to us and we would see the dollars and cents and we would think, is the fire chief having too great an authority on this, and ask questions around that? So I just wonder from our perspective as the warrant committee, is this tipping the scales as presently drafted without the amendment in a way that we need to protect financially the expenditure by limiting the vote? Or can we do that down the line when the recommendations come to us by sussing out whether it's something that has the full support of the committee or is, pressured by the chief in the back, which I'm not saying that he would do that, but that's kind of what we're trying to get at and having him be a non-voting role.
Can I respond to that? I don't frankly think there's really any way to suss that out. I think by the time it gets to the warrant committee, the work has been done, and then we're just really presented with the facts and figures.
It'll come to us as a capital project.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to go to capital committee first.
And I was, if I might, more concerned with just kind of operational input from the chief and the team member, and having a voice, and a vote that way. Less so. Pardon me?
I'm with you on the voice.
Okay. I mean, that's where I was coming from on the the operational input, less so, does he want a $500 million building versus a $400 million building? We want to know that it's operationally effective. So, it's my input.
Doug?
The original article, I like in favor of. I like the idea of the chief having a voice, and as I understand it now, his voice is only heard if they ask for it. He can't request to speak or anything, or it's only at their sufferance. So I like the idea that he is at the table to do this. I also like the amendment that he not serve as chair, because that seems prudent, because not all elected officials or servants or whomever, even in the future, may be as collegial and civic-minded as we all are. But your changing of this, I think, might be a bridge too far, and for the simple reason that I think it's gonna cause so much confusion that we're gonna be 2 hours talking about this in town meeting and not know what's actually happening, because as it is now, before the vote, I'm gonna have to ask, what's the language we're actually gonna be voting on?
Sure.
Of the recommendation.
Briefly respond to that. I personally don't think that it's, I think you vote this up or down based on the substance. I don't think that it's appropriate to vote this up or down based on the potential that town meeting's not gonna like it.
Well, not that they will like it or not, they can up or down it, I just.
I don't think that's an appropriate.
I think in the confusion at town meeting, that's gonna be just another huge opportunity to screw it up.
I think that we.
By adding it more and more.
I think the discussion right now has brought us to the point where we've diluted this significantly. The chief and the member of the fire department can't be chair, we got that. Now they can't be voting members. That's what we're voting on now, okay? So I think if there's no further discussion, let's bring this amendment to the amendment to a vote. It's been moved and seconded. So if there's no other discussion, all in favor of the amendment to the amendment, which includes the language effectively permitting the fire chief and the member to be members of the committee, chief may not be a chair, and they're non-voting. That's what we're recommending to the town meeting. All in favor? 2. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
I shouldn't tell you this, but you're opposed.
Abstentions. 1.
That's what I need.
The motion is defeated, so we go back. That amendment has been defeated. So the non-voting aspect of it is defeated. So now we're back to the amendment that Tom Hurley suggested, where the fire chief may not act as chair.
And the other member.
And the other member can't act as chair. So we have a motion.
It's already moved, so you can.
So we don't have to take another vote on the amendment.
Well,
this
you have to
amendment?
vote on this one.
We
We have to vote on this one.
We do, we had a
We
confused
reopened it because
vote.
we were all confused on what we were
Fine,
voting on.
okay, I'm sorry, my parliamentary procedure is a little rusty, particularly when we get this arcane. All in favor of the amended Article 11, which gives the fire chief and the member of the department a seat to vote, neither can serve as chair. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions? 1 abstention.
Abstention from both of them.
Abstention. The motion passes. Thank you very much. John, will you advise us as to how we have to redraft this, or how we have to do it? Because that's going to become important in the next week or so. Thank you. So, John, while we have you here, let's move on to one question that came up with the transfer of the Kidder branch, which we did not vote on. We tabled this, the discharge, transfer of the Kidder Library, which we have as Article 14.
Thank you.
The question was centered on the term transfer. And we had this conversation a little earlier. So it says, to see if the town will vote to transfer the former library, Kidder Branch Library property at 101 from the trustees of Milton Public Library for the library purposes to the trustees of Milton Public Library for the purposes of sale of said property. The word transfer was the sticking point,
Well,
as I'm recalling.
Transfer from the trustees to the trustees, which seemed weird, that's all.
Don't shoot the messenger, but that.
Understood.
That's the way the statute and the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court have laid out the procedure. It's a two-step procedure, even if it's the same body that holds the property.
I see.
Number one, you have to transfer the care, custody, and control of that property to the, in this case, from the trustees to the trustees for the purposes of sale.
Of conveyance, in other words?
Yes.
Okay.
2, you then have to vote to authorize them to sell the property. I know it sounds weird, but.
No, it's a two-step process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Does
the
anybody
word
have?
transfer is in the statute, and it's in the court decision
Got it.
interpreting the
Got
statute.
it. Does anybody have any questions on that? Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
We all get it? Okay. So the chair will, thank you, John.
Welcome.
The chair will entertain a motion to recommend Article 14, to see, what we're calling Article 14, to see if the town will vote to transfer the former Kidder Branch Library as stated in this. Chair will entertain a motion to recommend or not recommend.
I'll recommend,
Approval?
yeah, this is a town vote, to transfer.
Recommend to the town meeting.
Yeah,
Do we have a
whatever it
second?
says.
Second.
Second motion, any discussion further on this one?
I just want to go on record that I'm strongly opposed to the sale of any fixed assets, especially real estate, in the town of Milton for a short-term profit. We've done a lot of that in recent history, and I think that we will regret that, or the people in the near future will regret that. There are definitely solutions to the problem at hand of being a landlord that could maintain the property for Milton without having to get rid of it. And so I wasn't here last meeting, so I just wanted to put
No,
that on the record.
I would really like to have that voice in the minutes. I know you're doing a beautiful job, but I just want to make sure that that perspective is reflected, because I know several people consider that sale of town property and other not-for-profit property as something that really shouldn't happen. Please.
Question, how do we communicate that? It's the trustees of the library's sole decision, isn't it, if I understood it correctly?
Oh, as
or
we,
no?
we vote to approve or not to approve, that's the communication, because they're asking us for permission to sell the property.
So we could recommend no.
We could recommend a no vote on this, in which case they can't sell it, or the town meeting, well, they can sell it if the town overrides our recommendation, which has happened.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I
And
understood it
as we
differently.
understood it, the proceeds from this sale go into the library. Trustees are at the discretion of the library for capital improvements, I'm guessing? So we have a motion that has been made and seconded. Is there further discussion on that point?
Just, have we, and I know it's not the selectmen's article, but are we thoroughly sure that there's no other government use for this building? No other potential government use for this building?
Katie or Mr. Wells or Tom, Mike, is there a, that's an interesting question.
It is.
Aren't you glad you stayed? I mean, this
I
is.
had my pillow, no, I'm only kidding.
This is, not quite yet. This has
gonna
been
be
a
late.
question that has been kicked around many times, and the town of Quincy is having nightmares now because they need school buildings, and they've turned most of theirs into condos. And are we heading down the same road if we do something like this? I know it's not to that extreme, but.
I can only qualify it with the fact that in the middle of the winter, myself and Chair Wells, who's met Regina Malley from the Parks Commission there when the teen center discussion had taken place.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked the building with Kristen Holden from the library trustees, and by no means an expert on that stuff, but so I left it kind of up to the Parks Commissioners, and I know they discussed it, and they thought that it wasn't a good location for the teen center. Not the building itself. The building itself needed a little bit of work, but the fact that kids would have to cross the parkway twice to get there, it's a pretty dangerous trip as you come out of the square. So, but that's the only perspective that from what I've seen is
That was the only
town
solution that was offered as a teen center?
No, we brought in Department of DCHD, we brought in affordable housing people. I thought about anything we could possibly think of using it for, because to your point, you don't have opportunities like this that often. It doesn't happen very often, and my feeling is that I understand it's not our building. It's it's there. It comes under the trustees, and it seems that they want to do this. They want. I believe the revenue was an issue for them as well, which is kind of why we're at the crossroad we're at with it. But I do agree with you. I think that if you were to give it enough, if you could afford to give it some time and thought, I do believe you could find a suitable use that could enhance the quality of life in that aspect of the town.
I realize we don't have the people here to maybe answer the question, but is there an out-of-pocket cost at this point, or is there just a frustration with having to cash a rent check?
I don't know if their rent is making their costs. I believe Christine, I think she said that the rent, right now as it is, but that's their responsibility, not ours.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, no.
But I think, I take the point, because, I mean, let's face it, we had Mary Forbes Cunningham giving Cunningham Park, Nathaniel Kidder giving the library. I mean, nowadays, anybody who has large tracts of land is talking to the highest priced developer going to see what the market will bear. So we don't see a lot of beneficence of this nature coming down the road, and to see something that was given to the public trust so long ago and with good intentions, I mean, a library, I mean, who can argue with that?
I think your comments are well intended.
I understand the needs and changes and digital this, and nobody looks at books the way they used to and all that other stuff, but, so our needs can change too. I mean,
Right.
we can come up with
Mr. Chair, it has not been a discussion on my board. It hasn't been
It
an
hasn't,
agenda
it hasn't been brought up,
item.
it's just,
Has
you know,
not
see
been
what
a
we can get for this
Board of
asset.
Selectmen agenda item.
We've just looked informally, like, brought in those agencies,
Understood.
just take a look,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
could this be, what could we use it for?
Suzanne, you look like you have a question.
Just to be clear, if we vote not to recommend this to town meeting, and the town meeting sustains our
They can't do it.
They can't sell it.
Right, exactly. Right. Okay, is there any other discussion?
I have a
Clinton,
question.
please.
What'd you think about that? With,
What
the chair said.
To be more specific.
Wait, I'm sorry,
about
which,
that? No,
the
Joe.
fact,
What'd you think about what they said about the trustees, them wanting to do that?
I think that's a short-term current trustees issue, and that our role here is to provide the sounding board to make sure that they're making fiscally responsible decisions for the town as a whole. If they don't have a need for it, if there's a way to transfer it elsewhere, or hire a realtor to cash the checks and deal with the landlord issues, provided there's not money out of pocket that's, egregiously more. There's very limited space in Milton that is owned by the public at this point, and I think we would regret it in the very near term.
I
if
guess
we were
part
to
of the
give it
issue
away.
is with the terms of the gift, does it require the town to operate it as a library or for the benefit of the library? I'm unclear on that point. Because if that's the point, then they don't want to operate it as a library, then what happens? Do we have any information on that?
I asked specifically that, my question on that the answer to me on that specific branch, the answer is no.
No, so the town can
Which is-
dispose of it.
Which is why they
So it's an outright gift
they
at the
took the route
discretion of the town.
they took,
No, that
which is
was,
why you faced this article.
from what I heard in their other meetings.
Yeah,
Is that they had to if they sold it to the town for town use, they would have to sell it like market value. They
Market
couldn't
value.
That's true. They did say that, and that was in the discussion as well.
Because of terms of the will, they were limited in what they could do with
Okay,
it, so.
okay. Well, we have a motion that has been made and seconded. All in favor of adopting or recommending to town meeting to see if the town will vote to transfer the former
Be
Kidder
right
Branch
there.
Library property at 101 Blue Hills Parkway to the trustees as stated for sale of said property for consideration, et cetera. All in favor? 1, 2. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The chair will go on record. He doesn't usually vote, but I'm against the sale too.
Put the chair on record.
Put the chair on record. It's like, I hate to say it, it's like watching church property get sold. It never, or hospitals close.
Yeah,
It's-
you'll never get it back.
It's the same thing, you never get it
So
back.
we can give
So
them
we'll
time
find
to
some other
explore
property.
more
So
options.
we'll have to go back and revisit that. Okay, so this article will not be recommended to the town meeting for adoption. Okay, this last question that we have before we get to the, and thank you very much for your patience on the planning board. Article 17, John Flynn and I had an off-record conversation, which I think we should probably have here. Article 17 is along the same lines as Article 16. And the question I had is, how do we address Article 16 short of not recommending it? Or what is the town count? Article 17. Article 16 we've adopted. We've voted and recommended that. Article 17, we have not
The
discussed
gender-neutral
because
language for the Board of Selectmen.
Exactly right. What can we do? What do we have to do with that article? It's the same sense as Article 16.
You have at least two options, recommend a no vote, or recommend that it be referred to the sponsors, or to someone else for further study or whatever. The reason you have 16 there is 17 states an intent, but it doesn't state broadly enough what needs to be done. And my concern was that it would be beyond the scope of the article to expand it to include the information you see in Article 16. It was not, it's consistent with 17, but it has the necessary steps, because as you say, you need to amend your general bylaws, your
Yes.
zoning bylaws, the the special act charter.
17 doesn't address that.
Correct.
Right. So,
At
okay.
least those two options are available.
Does anybody have any other ideas about this, short of that?
You could put in the comments section that if 16 passes, then 17 becomes a moot point.
Yeah.
16 accomplishes the mission.
Is there any conflict should both 16 and 17 pass?
No, the only reason
No,
why
I
they.
think
Just
17 is
clear.
just not
So
as...
then it's
is
not-
con-
The only
17 is
reason why
not
17's still
comprehensive.
there, because they have to go back and. you gotta
Yeah,
sell
they
the
need
petition.
to add
Right.
more to it.
Right.
They're in compliance, or in agreement with
Right.
16.
16 is more comprehensive and does everything they wanted. The young woman who
That's
came
why
and
ours is
testified.
16 and theirs is 17. 16 passes,
17 is
17
moot.
becomes a moot point, yeah. And you
Right.
could put that in the, you could add that to the comments.
Yep. Okay.
Either in your comments or
Adoption
the
of,
16.
adoption of warrant 16, Article 16 renders 17 moot.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
But, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, your town bylaws say you have to take some action
Yes,
on the other. You can't
yes,
take no
okay.
action. So-
I had thought that was the case, and so if that's the case, the chair will entertain a motion on Article 17, either to not recommend it or to send it back to the committee, or the sponsors, in this case, the citizens petition. I think not recommending may be an easier move.
Is there the possibility of having the clarifying, sorry,
Right.
I think that we're aligned, that if there's a yes vote on 16, then we recommend voting no on 17?
We can do that.
No, we already did 16.
We voted 16 in, but if
But
the
if
town
the town
meeting
meeting-
adopts 16, then 17 would be a no recommendation.
But what if town meeting votes
It's gotta be.
down?
I would think it would have to be a no.
Can't have both.
Anyway.
It can't be contingent.
It just feels like there's a conflict between suggesting 16 without reservation and suggesting no on 17 without reservation, that
Explain it.
to avoid
This is
confusion, you
The person who
explain.
adopted or proposed this, sponsored this, they came in and spoke, and they said that they.
We like 16 better.
They support 16,
Yes,
so
because it's more comprehensive.
Exactly right.
But-
That's the only reason why I'm saying,
just adding the clarification that that's why we're saying
That's
yes
why-
to
yes,
one
yes,
and
yes.
no to the other is, I don't know the best way to accomplish that.
In the comments.
You can still vote, but
In
just
the
put that
comment
language.
section.
I think the chair's comment suggestion is a good one,
Yeah.
but it doesn't resolve it, it didn't say it. I think it's just recommended no, but here's why.
Yep.
Okay.
I would think so. I would
That's an
think that's why.
That was the suggestion.
All right, I think that's the right thing to do, recommend no, and then we'll explain why in the rationale section.
But I interrupted Kevin like
No,
5
but
times.
that's okay, I was just going to, why don't we just refer 17 back in case we have, something happens
What
to
hap-
16,
Yeah,
and we gotta
exactly,
do it.
when the 16's voted down at town meeting.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean-
'cause that, they didn't, she didn't want that.
oh, I know, I understand that,
But-
but,
But we're here to make the decisions.
but if we refer it back to them, they have an opportunity
To refile.
Refile.
And to we could do that too. So again, the chair is asking for a motion. I can't do that.
But what are you moving? But what are you moving?
I'm sorry, before we
You see, this is about the time we start to get punchy, so.
I've been punching.
Yes, John.
One other suggestion. If you recommend no, and if that scenario arises at town meeting, there's nothing to prevent you from revising your recommendation.
At the
during
meeting.
town
That's a good point. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Okay. And it would be the last article of probably a 2-day meeting. I'm sure everybody would be very happy
Oh,
to hear
yeah,
us.
they'd be really happy to be revised.
So I guess the question is, shall we vote to recommend a no on this? I would think that's probably the wisest. So the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll
I
make a
moved
motion.
that.
Good.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Since I moved everything last time,
Okay.
I moved the table.
Move to not recommend
Yes.
Article 17.
Yes.
Second.
Second, any discussion, any further discussion? All in favor of not recommending this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Opposed? Just, I'm going to ask, even though nobody is. Okay. Thank you very much.
Chair, I have one more question that
Yes.
relates to, because it's an unanswered question from
Yes.
when we voted 16.
Yes.
Um,
This was associated, the cost
Is
associated.
Just a ballpark of, albeit a one-time cost, there is a cost to this. We are the warrant committee, and we do look at money and numbers. So I'd just like to get even a ballpark of what the one-time cost might be to do all this. Has anybody thought about it, or?
I did think about it, Tom. We order letterhead, we order business cards, we order things like that.
There's some legal costs
Yeah,
associated
it's
with.
not nearly the magnitude of changing Tom Menino's name to Marty Walsh. But there is a cost. I mean, the reams of paper that say Board of Selectmen upstairs cost $379. All the Board of Selectmen cards currently, it's $25 a box, So I could see it well over $1,000 when you collect everything and start reproducing the paperwork, which then becomes outdated.
And I guess fortunately,
Absolutely.
our bylaws are in need of rewriting anyways.
That process is underway.
John?
So Chairman, it's still an open question whether this needs a referendum. I don't believe it does, but I've asked for guidance from the Secretary of State's office. They haven't answered us yet. I don't think it requires a referendum because you're just changing titles, you're not changing the structure of government. But if, God forbid, the state advised us the referendum would be necessary, then that would be a cost to answer.
Yes, definitely.
Those questions.
So given that, I've already, so that would be about, if you were to have an election, just a special election is about $30,000. So my thought, and I believe my colleagues would agree with me, is that we would place this on the general election ballot in April, so there's no additional cost
Okay.
to avoid that
That makes a lot of
$30,000.
sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. 30,000.
I know it is, but that special
More than
elections,
we guessed.
they're a lot of money.
Okay. But thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Clinton?
Nothing, no questions, but, also with the comments that Wendy
Yes.
said, we're gonna add that to the.
That's certainly, yeah, absolutely. So before we proceed to the, we have a little housekeeping before we proceed to the planning board. As I mentioned in the last meeting, we were going to parcel out the drafting of the comments for the articles. So beginning with Article 10, which we recommended, which is the special police, who was volunteering to comment, to write that comment? We really have to do this tonight, because we're going to get started on it. I don't want to be behind the 8 ball on this. Is there anybody who would like to draft this comment, recommendation on the rationale? No brave souls. Does the chair have to appoint volunteers?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I'm assuming that those of us who have not been through this process before should probably sit through it once before we start jumping in.
Not necessarily, because I was the chair and I did a lot of it.
This poor man was the chair the first time out.
There are examples online and in front of us in hard copy, so just because you're a newbie doesn't mean you can't do it. Great
Just
job.
wanted to clarify.
No, these are very, very highly motivated, intelligent group of people, and this is not, believe it or not, rocket science. You just have to write clearly, and there'll be plenty of people to edit you, trust me on that one. Okay. My goodness, now all of a sudden these comments that were flying left, right, and center, everybody's all of a sudden become quiet. Okay. This is not a difficult one to draft.
No,
Tom, thank
Yeah.
you.
Is this the right time to mention that there's a typo that no one will ever see if I don't mention it
Oh,
now?
please do. This is
in
exactly what we want to
Article
avoid.
10, Section 4,
Yeah.
it says in case of permeant removal
Oh,
instead
good
of
for you,
permanent.
permanent, yeah.
Which is a word that
Yeah.
I didn't know until I saw this typo.
That's probably why spell check
So
didn't
it's-
catch it.
It means permeable.
Yeah.
So permeable removal, I think we
So
mean
if an
Okay.
officer springs a
permanent.
leak,
So Tom Hurley will draft the comment for Article 10. Article 11 is the fire station membership. Who would like to? Chris, I should actually.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that a Tom one? Did you do the clarification?
This was Tom's article amendment too.
He,
one's enough for me though.
Yeah.
he
That's
wanted
fine.
to comment.
Anybody else? Come on, step up, ladies and gentlemen. I feel
I'll
like
do
a,
it.
I feel like a
Tom,
carnival
I'll do 10
barker.
if you do 11.
That's fine.
Okay, so I'll
No,
do 10.
We've got
Well,
we've got 11,
11.
All right.
Christine. Okay, Article 12 is the plastic bag. Jonathan? Thank you. Jonathan Boynton. Okay, Article 12 is,
The plastic bag.
Article 12 is plastic bag. Article 13 is the building, library, not recommended. I'm sorry, is the discharge.
Recommended
Actually,
teacher
13 and 14 could be done by the same individual.
Yeah, I wonder, we voted at the very first meeting to approve 13, but if we are voting down 14, I wonder if they still want
Well,
13.
No,
Well, they-
13 is the
they're-
building committee,
yeah.
they're two separate things.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
there's a
she
small
means
amount
they
of money
might
left.
want the
Yeah.
committee in case they want to look at the kidder again.
Right.
That'll be for the
But
building committee, that's not
they
their
can
charge.
ask for it.
wouldn't
That
be-
building
wasn't
committee
their
was
charge.
charged
Yeah,
with building
the
no,
new
no,
library.
and
Oh,
library.
what, it had nothing to do with Kevin?
Right, exactly
Oh,
right.
okay.
So Article 14, and 13 and 14 together.
I'll do those.
Thank you, Gwendy. Okay, do 13 and 14. 15 is the CFO.
I'll do that.
Chris, thank you. 16 and 17 could probably go together as well. This is the change of name for the Board of Selectmen.
I'm more than happy to do that too.
You want to do that? I'm happy to have you do that. Chris, okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So please, I guess, draft those as quickly as you can and send the text to Lynn so we can start to assemble them. I will write I will begin to write the introduction to the warrant report, which is a longer thing anyway. So we have, again, I'm very sorry, Cheryl, that we took so long, but please come and as briefly as you can, give us some of the highlights for some of the questions that we have on the planning board articles that we will consider. This meeting, this body will meet on the 17th of September. And I will work with the town administrator on working with the printer to get him to take a little bit and a little bit and a little bit so we can get this done.
Our next meeting is the 17th.
Our next meeting, I was going to bring this up after we're done, but since we're here, September 17th in this room at 7 o'clock, and we'll go over the articles. We're already working piecemeal on them so that we will have a sense of where they are. The 17th will be to consider any alterations, significant alterations in the language, because I don't feel comfortable as chair asking this committee to approve articles where we don't have finalized language. And again, we had a conversation of making sure that we coordinate better in the spring to make sure we don't have this problem. But if you want to very quickly run through the ones that we need some more clarification on at your choice.
Okay, good evening. Cheryl Tagayas, Chair of the Planning Board. I'm joined by fellow member Brian Furs. I think at your meeting last week, I mentioned that Brian had been working on some of the articles and may have better background information to answer some of the questions that you had than I may have. But before he does that, I did say that I would bring you a map of the Brook Road Overlay District. So I have that, and I will distribute copies of that. If you would like to ask any questions, now that you've had time to review, I know last week you had just received that language. I will say for background, the planning board held a meeting in June at the Tucker School. I think I mentioned last week that the library at the Tucker School was at capacity in terms of people attending and being interested in this property. This property is in difficult shape, and people who live in that area are interested in seeing it redeveloped. So there is neighborhood support to see something happen on this property. The planning board started with thinking about more than just the 3 parcels that are inside that blue line. Parcels 131 and 133 have been pulled out because those are the pre-existing non-conforming commercial uses. So right now, we're looking at what's identified here as 9 and 3. Those parcels would have to be combined in order for someone to apply under this zoning.
I think everybody has it. Thank you, Bill.
So this zoning would allow up to 6 townhouses to be built on this parcel, which would be just over a 20,000 square foot parcel. The rest of the language is very similar to what we do for our zoning language, where the town doesn't have design guidelines, and zoning oftentimes is just dimensional, but we try to put some language in, which is part of what we're tweaking a little bit, because we were told that some of that language might be deemed to be a little too vague when we're talking about traditional materials. What does that really mean? But otherwise, this language, it could be found in other sections of our zoning bylaw. So with that, any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
No, this is helpful to have this overview.
Why is this being handled as a zoning bylaw instead of just a sale of the property and like a special permit for building? Why are we specifically identifying the use for these 2 properties that are?
Well, the zoning for the property, well, the existing structure that's on the property, the former Knights of Columbus building, is what we call pre-existing non-conforming use. So when zoning was enacted in 1938, there were 3 commercial districts identified, and then single-family was overlaid in A, B, and C districts throughout the town. So there were a lot of properties, including the 2 on the corner, the commercial properties, that were then made non-conforming. So they are allowed to continue as their current use as a pre-existing non-conforming. But when someone goes to do a new use there, excuse me, they're left with the underlying zoning, which is the single-family that was put over it, or they're left with looking for a variance from the Board of Appeal, or looking for a zoning change. So in this instance, this property owner who had gone to the Board of Appeal, I think maybe 4 years ago, and sought to put 6 units on the property, that's identified as 9 on here, not including the property identified as 3. The Board of Appeal denied that, and the property has sat vacant since then.
When did that come up? What was the?
I think it was 4 years ago, Bill. I got that correct? 3 to 4 years ago.
Okay. And the reason given was?
I didn't follow, sorry, I don't have the details of what happened then. But there are folks in the neighborhood who have approached the planning board and planning board members and said, can you do something to assist with this? So the planning board felt as if, after hearing public comment at our meetings and support from neighbors, that this was a direction that we would support and that we would put forth our own overlay article for.
And you've had all that input already at prior meetings?
We have, but we will still, as I mentioned last time, 13th public hearing on it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next one.
Next one
Now, a couple of these are, do you have a question, please?
What were the comments from the public? Did you express that you wanted to do a 6-unit, or was that spoken about, or what did they generally say?
Right, that was spoken about. The current owner of the property who sought that variance, as Brian pointed out, is interested and would like to do 6 units there. So the people who came to our meeting and expressed support understand that this zoning would allow 6 units on this parcel.
And these are the neighbors
Now,
around?
some of the, right, and some of the things that the neighbors were concerned about have to do with things that are not zoning. So on your map, if you look at the top where, above the blue line,
Yep.
there's kind of an entrance drive.
Yep.
The people talked about that being an unsafe type of corner for pedestrians and vehicles. The zoning would require entrance to this property to come from Laurel Road, so that would no longer be allowed to be an access point.
Okay.
And then the idea would be that the town, that's town-owned property, so the town could do something with that triangular parcel that might look at making that a safer intersection for both. People were concerned about pedestrians, bicyclists, and the vehicles on
Okay.
that corner.
And these are the people of, sorry, Thatcher, Laurel Road, I mean, the neighbors around there, they all gave their input.
The ones who came to our meeting and spoke, yes. Sorry, let me see what I have here. Yeah,
The original variance had 6 units with 3 bedrooms. The new zoning has 6 units with 2 bedrooms. The original variance had the driveway using the existing driveway that exists today. The new zoning has using a driveway that would be on Laurel Road.
The other thing that the zoning requires is that the parking be at the rear, so that while you would have 6 townhouses, you wouldn't have 6 garage doors with 6 driveways coming off of Laurel Road. So that's a zoning requirement, so the, sorry, you can't-
Susanna, do you have a question?
So that, as a zoning requirement, means that an applicant who would file an application under this zoning would have to follow that unless they sought some kind of variance for that. But it would be pretty clear in the zoning what the intent of our interests here in that parking and access.
Kevin, do you have a question?
No. I got one.
Has there been an assessment of it's clear that this zoning is about what the current owner wants to do with the property, which seems more permit-based than zoning-based, just in general. Have we looked at the impact to the town about having it be a retail establishment or in the business zoning, given that there are business operations close by to it, so that maybe we shouldn't limit the use of this land to specifically what the current owner wants to do for their own bottom line, but what should be best for the town in the long term?
There was mixed opinions about expanding commercial use. In fact, there was a lot of concern about expanding commercial use, which is why the 2 commercial properties were taken out of this for now. Not that we don't want to come back to it, but there was less support, less consensus on expanding the commercial use to this property.
Sorry.
There's a discussion about
Parcel
mixed use.
3 is owned by someone different, is that?
Correct.
So, does this person also want to change their zoning to put up something, or is that just included in it for consistency's sake, or?
Well, the zoning, whether that property owner wants to sell or not, I don't know. This zoning would require one of them to acquire the other parcel at some point, because the zoning requires frontage. So the frontage of parcel 9 is that narrow line at the top of the paper.
But that's not Laurel Road.
But that's not Laurel Road. So in order to meet, or to be able to use again, overlay is not changing the zoning. Overlay is providing an alternative to the underlying zoning. So the people who own this property could still, I'm guessing that number 3 looks like it's probably non-conforming also, but they still would have rights under the existing zoning that the overlay wouldn't change. It just gives the owners of the property an alternative to do something different with that property. This requires a two-third vote at town meeting, like all zoning articles, just, so people, is a high threshold for a reason, because people want a lot of support for zoning change. So, again, it's an overlay, it's not an actual change.
Question. Two, it was a 3-bedroom originally, now it's a 2-bedroom. With neighbors in support of that as well?
I don't recall any opposition to that. We'll find out, I think, more detail on this, because the zoning is now more specific than it was at that time. We'll get more feedback on the detail next week at our public hearing.
Okay.
And that's why we said that we really felt it's important not to come to you with final
Right.
language, and
But
we
we
would
appreciate
hope that
the
you would
background
wait.
because it'll
right.
make the approval or the vote on it as we go forward a
Right.
little easier, which is why I suggest we move along.
Okay. All right, so I also said that something might be better if we had red line version.
Yes.
So I have here the planning board associates. So, and part of that is some background that's on here. And part of this, Brian may be able to answer because he's been doing some research on this. So, Brian, would you like to give a little bit of overview?
Sure, just quickly, the note that's at the bottom, which is in italics, is actually from the Government Study Committee dating back to 2006. This was considered in 2006 at the time. The planning board itself was not supportive of adding an associate member. Since then, the planning board has had a complete rollover, and the current membership believes that an associate member would be very helpful in making our project be permitted more efficiently under special permits where a supermajority or a 2/3 majority vote is required. And we've dusted off the language. The red line is a result of some changes that came about after discussions with town council and a closer look at the statute that allows for associate members, the Massachusetts statute. And I've done some preliminary research. It's very difficult to figure out exactly which towns have associate member provisions and which towns don't, because not all towns fill the associate member position, even if they have the provision. But I would say probably somewhere in the range of 30% probably have an associate member of the towns that I've looked at to date. I've spent the last couple of weeks going through municipality by municipality, and I'm through the Ps, which is about 187 municipalities that I've been able to verify. So, getting there. Almost done.
Okay.
Again, just generally, from a background standpoint, to approve a special permit on the planning board, you need a 4 out of 5 member vote. The challenge that creates is that if any member is unable to vote due to a conflict of interest, due to an absence, you can't be absent for more than one meeting, that creates a problem where now you need a complete majority vote. The associate member provides an opportunity for the chair to have a member that can sit in the case of an absence. And allow for more flexibility around planning meetings, and allowing the members of the planning board to have a little bit more flexibility in missing a meeting if they need to due to illness or a family commitment. And of course, conflicts of interest do arise because things happen next to our properties and in our neighborhoods.
Is there any institutional memory why this was not adopted in 2006?
I was not on the board. I've heard through hearsay what I think it was. Mr. Clark may remember, I don't know, but I believe that it was, at the time, there was a member on the board whose wife was ill, and there was a concern that that was an opportunity for someone to come in and essentially displace that member. I don't know, that's what I've heard. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. I know after the fact, some of the board members thought maybe it would have been helpful to have someone there after the Henry
We have a select woman, Katie.
I can just add, I was a member of the Town Government Study Committee in 2013, it was not 2006, it was 2013. When we looked at that, and the 5 members of the planning board at the time were opposed to it. So the Town Government Study Committee put it forward to the selectmen as something to think into the planning board. I think more to the planning board as something to think about, but there was substantial opposition from the planning board, so that's why it was not ever put forward.
Okay. And what does the planning board think now?
Well, the current planning board, I think it has some concerns about I think I mentioned last week that certain requirements of our board might hinder the range of people who can commit to the time. And if you travel for work and you may miss more than one meeting, for example, or if you have a family responsibility, that might take you away from one meeting. So we wanted to give a little more opportunity for who could serve and feel as if that they wouldn't be hindering the board and the public in our work. One of the things I mentioned last week that we talked about at our meeting, that we had a lot of discussion about the fact that should this person be appointed or elected? And we went forward with the appointed, but we wanted to have language revision so that there was concern about someone who was not elected being able to deliberate in the same fashion as people who were elected. And so this applies only to special permits.
Okay.
That's the first thing. It wouldn't apply to zoning or other site plan approval, subdivision, approval not required subdivisions. There's plenty of other things that we do that it wouldn't apply to. And so what we discussed was that we would add some language that the associate member would be present at the special permit hearings, but would only participate in the discussion if they had been designated to be the member replacing the person who couldn't otherwise be the acting member then.
Okay.
And they need to sit from the beginning of the hearing, because if the absence occurs due to an absence, not a conflict of
defeats the
interest, it could
purpose.
happen at some point in the middle of the hearing.
Yeah.
But we didn't want the opportunity, after discussion, to have someone having 6 members participating in discussion with only 5 voting. So the opportunity to be a participating member in the discussions would only occur if there was a conflict or an absence.
Right, so Mr. Flynn's going to be working on that language a bit, but we did want to wait until after our hearing, so planning board members hear from the public and then decide if our board itself wants to change its recommendation.
Okay.
All right, so,
Have a couple more we can just go through?
yeah, I just wanted also,
And then we'll call it.
I do, while we have Brian, want to talk about the traffic, but there were a couple of questions about
All right. This is Article 4.
Sorry, again, I don't have this in the same order as the warrant that I got today.
Article 5, traffic impact mitigation, yes. This is our Article 5.
Right. So there was a question last week in the first paragraph, where it says, is the first paragraph all one sentence? I think it is. The and/or on the monetary contribution. So I spoke to Mr. Flynn about that, and what I had explained last week in terms of if you had a mitigation that wasn't the full amount, I compared it to the affordable housing requirement. If you have 13 units and you require 10%, it's 1.3. You do 1 unit, you have the 0.3 can be a contribution. Mr. Flynn agreed that that's what this language does here, is something comparable to that. So let's just say a traffic light were a mitigation, but that wasn't the full dollar value of a mitigating factor, so then there could be a monetary contribution as well, so that would be the and/or.
Okay.
Brian, is that your understanding too? Yeah, okay. And then there was the discussion about whether the monies could be used for other parts of town.
Yes.
And I asked Brian about that, so I'm going to have him give you some feedback.
So if you go to the 5th page, under funds, which is a separate heading, the first sentence, potential use of funds. Funds may only be used if the expenditure directly relates to the impact created by the development to which it applies. Funds may not be used to pay for existing deficiencies unless the deficiencies are increased by the new development. So any mitigation has to be related to the development to which the payment, from which the payment is coming from. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be exactly adjacent to a project. The impact could be a mile away theoretically, but it does have to be attributed to this project.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. This is going to make
Can I just give you
the
one
meeting.
more?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you
Yeah,
were-
this, the one I want to give you, again, is another red line, although it happens to be blue line.
Actually, that helps out a lot more than you might think, because when we go and study these things before the next meeting, it just answers a bunch of questions.
I understand because it helps.
We're
out a
turning
lot.
to blue.
Red turning to blue, right.
So, again, just may I give you a quick overview?
Please, yes.
I'll just wait till you all get it circulated around. Okay, so, I think I mentioned last time that this is a formatting also, because all of this language is in one paragraph currently in the existing bylaw, which makes it difficult to use. Secondly, the part that's struck, this was new language that was approved by town meeting last year, I believe, and I'll get the exact date for you. Building Commissioner and Zoning Enforcement Officer Joe Prondak has had difficulty with this language. He feels as if it's vague and therefore difficult to enforce. And so he came to us with this proposed amendment. He's working on the diagram that I mentioned would be useful. What has come up is that the language was such that it was an interpretation that he made that was challenged a few times, and he felt the language needed to be clear so that his interpretation would be a bit more black and white, if you will, in terms of the building envelope versus existing. And let me just go to the exact language. So when he, again, we're talking about pre-existing non-conforming buildings, but this time we're talking about single-family homes and two-family homes, okay? And there's a lot of these exist too, because when the zoning was overlaid, there was no analysis done to see how many would comply with the new zoning. So there's a lot of instances, a lot of homeowners in Milton have to go to the Board of Appeal for variances when they're looking to make alterations or additions to their homes because of this. So this is designed to help make it easier. So we're trying to make it easier for folks. And
Anything that streamlines the process, I think, will be happily received.
so this is to make it clear that you wouldn't have to get a variance, but you could get a special permit. There's a legal difference that is important because a variance has, well, people have legal standing in general, but one is allowed to grant a variance on, John, maybe you can explain the legal specificity of, but there's very few things that are hardships that one is supposed to be able to get a variance under. So that can be challenged if a variance is granted. I'm told a lot, well, the Board of Appeal grants a lot of variances, but are they meeting that true letter? It can become a question. So the special permit is meant to be an easier and less burdensome process. Hopefully not requiring necessarily legal counsel and other expenses for homeowners. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is, again, dealing with things that come up a lot for the building commissioner. So you go to the middle of the page, where it's the pre-existing non-conforming in the business use. So now if somebody's going to change the business use, they have to go and to the Board of Appeal to get that approved. And this would allow the building commissioner basically to be able to approve that without going to the Board of Appeal in most cases, except if you're making something which is allowed in the business district now, which a single-family residential abutter might have some concerns about. So that would be the sales room. So that's like an auto body sales room or an auto sales room, a repair shop for motor vehicles, garages, filling stations, and warehouses.
Please.
Does this envision then, and I apologize if I'm misunderstanding this, but does this envision an increase in the special permit process? An increase of the use of the process?
Well, it would replace variance with special permit in some instances. Again, the idea is to go for a variance is what has been considered a more burdensome process than going for a special permit.
Well, the reason I ask is that if this is going to have the effect of increasing the use of the special permit process, and there's another article about an associate member who's there for the special permit process, then I'm just wondering if we want to think about, we as a committee want to think about the appointment versus election aspect of it.
Well, to make it more complicated, yeah, some special permits are granted by the Board of Appeal and some are granted by the Planning Board. They're not all granted by the Planning Board.
This one will be
This would
by
be
the zoning.
This is by the
By
zoning
the
board,
Board
so
of
this-
Appeal.
that's unaffected by this.
Unaffected,
All right,
yep.
Perfect.
The majority of these ones that you just talked about for the last 5 minutes have to do with the zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
That removes the variance, which has a much higher threshold to reach.
So, right, so I was conflating the two. One doesn't have anything to do with the other, is the point. Okay, great.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to your deliberations on the 13th. I'm very grateful that you came. Thank you all very much for coming.
Quick question, just on this, number 9, this doesn't have anything to do with this one, right? I'll take that, right?
I know which one's 9 is.
Okay, so there's one that's 9 and there's another one that's 9 as well.
Oh, sorry, it's only within the blue.
Okay, so they're not related at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's another 9 here.
To be clear.
This came off the,
Yeah, flip it over, make it a 6.
it might be for
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, our town administrator, our select board, Cheryl, John, thank you very much for taking the time. We covered everything we needed to cover. Again, thank you very much. Congratulations for your fortitude. We've set our meeting for the 17th of September at 7 o'clock here. You will receive an agenda for that. If there's no new business, I don't think there is. Move to adjourn. All in favor?
I want to
Thank you very much. Good night.
You want to win one, huh?
I need to end on a big note.
Gotta get it done.
So-